Locked On Women's Basketball listeners, if you didn't know about the CBA, you definitely know now. Yesterday, Howard talked to an expert on the WNBA CBA, and I am so happy to say I am joined by another expert on the WNBA CBA. We're going to be covering it more in depth. Please listen to Howard's episode with Terry Jackson, but Locked On Women's Basketball starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's a gem right there.
I love it. I love our little jingle. And we are having a great episode of Locked On Women's Basketball. I also want to push everybody to check out the Locked On newsletter. It's a daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com and start your day with the all new free Locked On newsletter. I also want to shout out one of our sponsors for today, which is Game Time. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, that's enough of that, guys. I want to introduce our guest for today, Roberta Rodrigues. I am so happy. If you don't already follow her on Twitter, you simply must, because all of her threads are so amazing. She's also the founder at Beta Basket, bilingual too, so maybe we'll touch on that. But I'm so happy to have you here. Like I mentioned to you before this call, I'm in law school, and sometimes for fun, I'm literally reading the CBA, and I'm excited about this news. So thank you for joining us to break it down.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for welcoming me to talk this topic that I've always been kind of obsessed about. It's kind of like a hyper focus of mine to just discuss the CBA. I started covering women's basketball because of because I think it's such an interesting landscape to study and observe. I started in 2008, and so much has changed since. So being able to observe the changes, especially the rapid changes those past this like last 2 years for max, has been fascinating, and I'm happy to discuss what's going to be probably like a landmark CBA in history.
There's so many ways we could go from here. One way I want to go is just set up the listener. So if you're a daily listener, thank you. You should be. Also, yesterday you heard all from Terry Jackson, the executive director of the WNBPA, the Players Association. And her and Howard talked about losses versus investment, the distinction between those two, defining CBA success from a WNBA perspective. So for you, someone who's been covering women's basketball since 2008, first of all, thank you for that. Second of all, you say it's such an interesting landscape. What about this CBA makes it a landmark decision in terms of women's sports, but also in a broader landscape, which I'm sure you agree with me that the WNBA is one of the most interesting leagues to study when it comes to the intersection of so many different topics?
Yeah, and I think that Nneka Ogwumike, her statement during the announcement, she says, and I'm going to quote that, she says, "This is a defining moment, not just for the WNBA, but for all of us who believe in progress. The world has evolved since 2020, and we cannot afford to stand still." So I think it comes down to the fact that the WNBPA is a union. And we had the first union in women's professional sports, and unions are key for workers' rights. Right. I think one thing that the WNBPA said is that players want to have a fair share of the value that they bring to the league. And again, that's what unions want. It's part of the root of the belief of what a trade union is. And some people frown upon it, but it comes from a Marxist fundament that what the worker produces belongs to the worker. So that's what unions stand for. And truth is that most companies, most organizations, and the WNBA is an organization, lowballs the value of what the worker, the players, produce to them, and gives them back less than what they deserve.
Thank you for that. I love that we're starting with Madam President herself, and I wanna kinda hone in on what you heard from her. So, I know you had asked her a question about the CBA before this announcement, and she had mentioned in that answer that what they were really focused on was the vote itself and making sure that as many people as possible were voting. So, can you just break down for the listeners what actually goes into that vote? Is it just the WNBPA voting, or is it all players?
They need to get a majority vote. So
Mhm.
they need to have players who are in the union, because that's how unions work. Like a union asks for democracy, right? So a union needs to be a role model in that sense. So they needed to have a certain amount of votes that was not disclosed, but it was not. I mean, I had no doubt, like not a single like shadow of a doubt that they were going to get the votes. The truth is that players were like, they had grown tiresome of the current agreement. That The documentary Shattered Glass, a WNBPA story, sheds a light on it, and Brianna Stewart says herself, I want to opt out. And Nneka Ogwumike and Jonko Jones did not say with all the words, but they hinted on that. So I had no like, it was, I was sure that was going to happen. Also, because of what we have been hearing during the season, I always go back to what Kelsey Plum said in that podcast. That, like, it's not that they want NBA salaries; they want a fair share of what they produce to the league, and that's exactly what players are seeking. So. They started the WNBPA started the committee for a potential to discuss if they were going to opt out or not about a year ago, and it all came down to this decision. Of course, with everything that we saw come out of this year, a new TV deal. We had the recent, I mean, the season was over. The WNBPA announced that they were opting out, and then the WNBA announced a new partnership with Nike. So everything is that the players are producing is so much more than in 2020. So it needs to be reevaluated.
There's so many changes that have happened. That media rights deal, we have for the next 11 years a $2.2 billion deal. And
Mhm.
what is the significance, too, would you say, of that media rights deal and a new Nike deal? What does that really tell you about the state of the WNBA right now?
It says that big brands are seeing the value. And the thing is that those brands, they don't take risks. We're talking about Nike, we're talking about Disney. We're not talking about, VCs and individual investors who are gonna take risks. We're talking about big brands that if something goes wrong, they're gonna lose trillions of dollars. They're not gonna lose $1 million. They're not gonna lose tens of millions. They're gonna lose probably like tens, like hundreds of trillion, like trillions of dollars. So, and those are businesses that have been in the market for a long time. They have whole legal and accounting, financial teams backing them to advise on what is worth investing or not. So if you have Nike and Disney investing huge amount of dollars in the WNBA, that is because you have probably the savviest of the financial executives in this world telling you that this is a lucrative business, and this is a place where we know we're going to see a return on investment.
Big brands investing big dollars. I want to get into that. I also want to kind of say, I'm sure a lot of people listening heard too what Claire Size said after the Liberty finally won their championship, but we actually have to give a nod to one of our brands giving investment in us. So today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And for fans of another sport, maybe we could talk about football. NFL fans, you can start the season big with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit fanduel.com. That's fanduel.com. Okay,
Yeah.
Roberta, we got to keep on rolling with this. So the Liberty hoist the trophy. I'm in the stands, and for me, I'm a rookie compared to you. I've been covering this league for 4 years, but still, I would say I have seen tremendous growth. And we had a female owner talking about the investment that she made, and I know Terry talked about it on her episode with Howard, saying this is investment. We're not really going to be worried about loss like past ownership. We're worried about our investment in the future. So you mentioned maybe like it's not a VC who's taking a risk, but sometimes owners are taking those risks. So how would you say different owners, especially because we're adding a new team to the league, how can new owners look at WNBA return on investment? Um, is it really something that you think every team pretty much is going to be successful, or is there a huge disparity between teams, would you say?
There's a huge disparity today, and that's kind of one of the reasons why it took so long for the WNBA to implement charter flights. So going back to the New York Liberty, one thing that I also like to point out is that Clara Tsai, she is not only a female owner, she's also an Asian owner, which when it comes to WNBA ownership, it's a minority.
Mhm.
And she and her husband, again, they are not rookies in this business. They have several businesses. They have the Nets. They have, I think, a hockey team. I know they have other businesses. They also have an esports team. So when they entered the WNBA, they were not in it to lose money. Again, like how do millionaires become billionaires and how do billionaires become trillionaires? By being very smart about how they spend and by making sure that they're not going to lose the money they're spending. So what we're seeing today is a growth in the value of WNBA teams. So I'm going to take my home team here, the Seattle Storm, which was evaluated in over $150 million, and they purchased the team for $10 million. So in a 10-year process, that's a huge growth. But they were able to buy a team for $10 million. Today, no one can buy a WNBA team for $10 million, and no one can implement a team for $10 million. When you think of the expansion fees, I think Golden State paid $50 million and Toronto paid $150 million, something on. I know it was much more than the $50 million. So investment today, and that's part of economic growth. It excludes certain people, but it also allows those who can help towards growth coming. So, and the way that I see it, the WNBA cannot be seen as a tax write-off for people anymore. You can, which is kind of what the Madison Square group was treating the New York Liberty as.
Mhm.
They treat it as like almost charity, like, oh, we have some millions left over, let's put that on women's basketball. That's not that. First off, women's basketball has never been charity, but now it is a very serious business, and the financial statement has very big consequences. So teams need to be ready. to start the business, so start the team, and make sure that it has long term, that it can go long term, longevity. So it does change on like who can invest in the WNBA, but it also means that that investment is going to be high quality. And I say all that I said all that meaning that like we're gonna see more billionaires coming into the WNBA, and I feel like teams that don't have that bandwidth to provide the best care possible for players are gonna be kind of like pushed to the side or be bought out.
Mm-hmm. So perfect shift, because now we're going to talk about the players. And if they didn't have an argument on their side before this season, they definitely do now. So average viewership this season was 505,000 people. Last year was 379,000. You mentioned the shattered glass. Also, this huge continuation in a cultural significance of players themselves. So the players want something called revenue share.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between the revenue share that WNBA players get and the revenue share that they're asking for, which is much like the ones that NBA players get?
Yeah, so one important thing to point here is that the WNBA does not have a revenue share, a set revenue share program established, as is for total revenue. The NBA does. So ticket, merchandise, uh, partnerships, corporate partnerships, the money that the NBA makes, 50% goes towards players. And the WNBA, that's not established. The only revenue share that players are entitled to is if the cumulative revenue made by the league is over what they had targeted. So, and there are so many hoops to jump through for you to get there. There is no transparency on how they can get to that amount, and that's actually something that Howard talked to Terry Jackson about, and I loved it. Anyway, so players, one of the first lines of the press release, and again, I it was actually the first subtitle. It says players demand a new economic model with higher pay, better benefits, professional standards, and an equitable share of the success they've created, reflecting their true value. What they're saying is that the share that they make today is not fair. And as of the last season, WNBA players were less than 10% of the total revenue made by the WNBA was sent towards player, less than 10%. And that's why you have players going overseas. That's why it took so long for the league to implement charter flights. So the league, I think, got into like the billions last year, but the WNBA players saw very little of that money, and because they have such a hard salary cap, it's hard for them to make any more than what the max allows. And I know that Jewel Lloyd, Arika Gomboale, and Jackie Young had the highest salaries, and it's around like the 250,000. For them to get to the like 500K that Kathy Engelbert was talking about, they would have to be like perfect players and win every bonus possible, which that's not what players want. They want like base salary that's fair to their value. It's kind of like when you accept a job and they're like, yeah, you're gonna make this and then it can grow to this, but the only guarantee salary that you have is the bare minimum. So players want to go above that bare minimum. They definitely want revenue share. When I asked Nneka how high that was in the mind at the time, they were mostly concerned about gathering votes to opt out, but she said that yes, having a salary cap, a revenue share that reflects players' actual value is definitely at the top of the mind. In my research, I was able to talk to some very influential people in the WNBA landscape, including Nneka Ogwumike and Brianna Stewart's agent, and all those people said yes, revenue share is the players' main concern. So I think we're going to see big changes, and I think players are going to be happy. Not sure about the league, but I think players are going to be happy.
Oh, you're so great. I would love to ask you some more questions. We do have to shout out one more of our people again, our sponsors for today. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to actually connect this back to other leagues and maybe what else we could predict out of these negotiations that will be happening in the next couple months. So stay tuned. All right. So we're talking about basketball, and also this season is one of hockey too. I can't lie. Going to a hockey game is so fun. I went with my friends from college one time and we were so cold, but we're close, so it was okay. I love Game Time for choosing tickets, not just for games, but also for concerts and other things to have some fun. Game Time actually has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It curates, so you actually don't even have to do that much work. It's easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I also love the super deal. It's just so good to go into Game Time. There's so many features to choose from. And I always say that one of my favorite too is the seat view. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So you know if there's a pole in your way or something like that. So I want to make sure that you guys take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Okay, Roberta, I only have you for a little bit more, so I want to make sure we get as much of this as possible out. This was the thing. Like people, if you're listening back to back and you're like, why are there 2 episodes on CBA? There should be maybe
huge deal.
Yes, it's a huge deal. And so you mentioned one feature of the negotiations, a new economic model, player salaries, minimum professional standards. You mentioned locker rooms, just better features overall for Nneka pretty much went to Seattle for those better professional standards.
Yeah.
Also, we want increased retirement benefits, pregnancy and family planning benefits. And I want to see for you, what is the connection with the NWSL? Like, just so we could kind of put into context, I know this is Lockdown Women's Basketball, just how other leagues are doing it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I love that question. I actually messaged Howard before we hopped on here, saying that I listened to his interview with Terry Jackson, and I love that he asked about the NWSL, because what the NWSL did is historical. They removed the draft, and basically every season, every player is a free agent, and they have full control basically over where they're going. So that is something that is historical. I do think that the WNBA would not benefit from that model, because soccer and basketball work very differently worldwide. The WNBA benefits a lot from most of the top talent in basketball coming from the US, whereas if the NWSL doesn't open up for international talent, it's not gonna be fun, because you have players choosing to go to La Liga or to the English league instead of coming to the NWSL. So they had to make those changes so they can attract top talent. And in terms of women's basketball, I come from an international background. I'm from Brazil. I grew up watching FIBA, so I know
that part would come up. I knew it.
I know that there's so much amazing talent worldwide, but the WNBA does feed off the NCAA mostly. So,
Mhm.
and in terms of visibility, the European women's basketball leagues don't have near as much visibility and marketing as the WNBA. So international players still want to come to WNBA even though they can make more money overseas, because they want to have at least that experience. Because of, if you have your name in the WNBA, it means something. Now that's different for top European talent, because euro is worth more than dollars. So, like Gabby Williams was saying, but I know that people have been sharing that Gabby Williams quote. I made that question because that's something that has a lot to do with the CBA, and that's because of the prioritization. Basically, the owners were like, "Oh, you want more money? You have to be here." The thing is that, like, they are now, owners are asking much more than what they're giving. The league's value and the players' value is much larger than what they are offering the players now. So prioritization is not fair. Gabby Williams has made that very clear, and she has said it's not worth it for me to come here if I'm making more money overseas. Now you have, for example, there were three Brazilian players in the WNBA, and I know that, like, if I take $100 to visit my family, I'll have 500 reais. So it means that the money that they are making here is gonna feed their family, like, probably for like 6 months, a year. So that's why I think the NWSL model of no draft does not work for the WNBA. But I do hope that someday we're gonna see like more internationality in the league. And I think that in terms of family planning benefits, I think that the WNBA can set a new standard. They already set a new standard with this past CBA. They offered fertility treatment. They offered to cover some part of the players who were going uh, through IVF treatments or these kinds of fertility
Mhm.
treatments. But that's still not enough, especially when you consider that this is a league where queer players are out and loud and they have families. The benefits that they're offering now is not enough. So, and retirement benefits also. Our league legends need to not only be recognized but respected, and they need to have some sort of financial stability for what they have helped the league become.
Yeah, so maybe Diana won't retire until she knows that she's gonna get
That's the dream, isn't it? We want Diana Taurasi forever.
Okay, so I have to let you go because you have an appointment to get to. You're a wealth of knowledge. This is so impressive. One quick final question is I was surprised because I thought we had some more time between WNBA finals ending and the news about the CBA coming out. Obviously, that wasn't the case. So, how quickly do you think these negotiations are we going to see changes because the players have so much on their side now, so much momentum?
I wish. I am not optimist about those negotiations. I am not surprised at all that they announced the very next day. I was prepared for it. They could opt out. The deadline to opt out was November 1st, but I was like, "There's no way they're gonna wait for November 1st." So I was actually, they didn't want to take away from the players who were in the finals. Didn't want to take like the spotlight from those players. Not shocked at all that it came the day after, and I think it's amazing because that keeps the conversation going. I think it was smart that they did it that way because they're basically giving the league more time to negotiate with them. I think it's going to be a clash. I
Mm,
do think so. Today, players have public opinion on their side,
mhm,
but ownership in the WNBA is still very old school. And when the New York Liberty was fined $500,000 for flying the players, the WNBA was trying to gain leverage with owners who are not like billionaires and who are afraid that players are
Mhm.
going to ask more. So I think I would not be surprised if there was like a lockdown, or if players were to like here, if listen, if you don't give us that, we're not going to play. I don't think it's impossible. I think that for a long time players felt constrained, and the league has made them feel constrained, and owners had too much power. Today that dynamic has shifted, and I don't believe owners are ready to understand that they have less power than players. So it's going to be a power struggle, I feel like, more than anything. And it's going to be that's where we're going to see who the commissioner is actually working for. Is she looking is she looking for players needs, or is she looking for owners comfortability? So I think that's where we're at. I do think it's going to be a clash of powers. I do think there's going to be stubbornness. I think that the WNBPA is equipping themselves for that battle. I do think we're going to see things change, and good. I think we're going to see good things happen. Yeah.
Let's see. Definitely good things happen. Thank you for you being on. That's why good things have happened.
Of course.
Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. So nice to meet you. And thank you for all the work you do on this.
No, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you inviting me. I am a sports business nerd. Love talking about this stuff. I already told Howard that I want to write things. So whenever you need me, I'm here.
Okay, great. Great, guys. Make sure you check out more of Roberta's work. Her Instagram is linked right on this show. So make sure you check it out. And your favorite podcast also has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Podcast daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the new free Locked On newsletter. Thank you. Happy Wednesday.